I say this all the time. High performers are not driven by title or salary. They are driven by making an impact, by being part of something that's important and understanding that the work that they're doing has bigger meaning and purpose. We only have one life. And so I want to experience my job in a way that feels fulfilling. And I feel like it's important. And I love the people that I work with, and no amount of money is going to put a price on that. And so obviously I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here, and those things really matter. And the experience fund for me too, same. I don't care what the dollar amount was. The fact that I'm celebrated to go try a new thing is amazing. I'm really big on travel and just experiencing different things, and I felt so supported here.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Today is not about us, it's about you. So this is going to be jam-packed. Tons of dad jokes coming.
We are right now laying the groundwork for who is going to be leading tomorrow.
This song is such a jam.
Ideas don't build multi-million-dollar businesses. It's the implementation and execution of those ideas that do.
Self-made can lead to self-destruction. You are successful at what you give attention to.
This is why I was created. This is why I was made. I was made to do this.
It's about how to build your playbook.
That was such an incredible session.
Welcome to another episode of Inside the Process, the real-time podcast where we dive into all the best practices to help you continuously improve and hopefully level up the work that you're doing.
Yeah, that's right. And the way we do that is we bring on the most talented, the best thought leaders, the greatest minds to share how they do what they do so we can all get better here together. And you get to be part of this process. So we love doing this live because you are here. You can ask us your questions in the chat. We'll be taking a look at those questions. We'll bring them up as we come through the whole session. So please be active and involved, share your thoughts. And we are just so excited that you are here with us.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Mallory, a 10-year systems and ops veteran turned marketer, and I'm here with Shawn, the super awesome training and dev guy, better known around here as Mentor Shawn.
Oh, and you are people and ops super duo. Super, super excited that you're here. We are your hosts for Inside the Process. Welcome. And I am just super, super tickled to bring on our special guest. This is Marlowe. She is our talent acquisition specialist here at Trainual. So she has been with us for a little while. I didn't have the pleasure of being hired through Marlowe's processes, but I have seen all the good things that have come as a result of it. You're going to love Marlowe. She's a yoga instructor. She is a world traveler. She's got all kinds of fantastic ideas, and she's got energy like it's amazing. So Marlowe, I'm going to turn it right over to you so they can all feel that energy right off the bat. Tell us a little bit about you and your journey, how you got here.
Woohoo! All right. I'm so excited, everyone. Hi. A lot more HR, a lot of talent acquisition in the chat. I'm so excited. I'm amongst friends. So my background is really interesting. I actually started in hospitality and then went from hospitality to staffing to startup sales, back to staffing. Like it's kind of been all over the place. And I think when I look back at that, the consistent thread is people. I absolutely love people and I love business. And there is no better intersection of business and people than hiring, right? A lot of people will say, oh, that needs to sit under this department or this department. Really, hiring is a business function. So it really needs to touch every department. And I love the collaborative effort. I love getting to know people. And, when I was in staffing, I would hire and say goodbye and I'd never see that person again. And now I'm so, so fortunate to be able to do this for Trainual, where I not only get to spend time with such amazing people, but then I get to see them drive success in the company. So it's truly the coolest job in the world.
I love that. So I actually did have the pleasure of being hired and interviewed by you, but I actually didn't get the first job that I threw my name in the ring for at Trainual, if you remember correctly. But I remember very vividly how incredible you made me feel throughout the entire process, especially when delivering the tough news of, hey, this doesn't really seem like the right fit for you. But, I'd love to talk about where you might be a good fit. And I remember that experience making me even more determined to find the role within Trainual. that was best suited for me on the team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty incredible to not only be in that right fit dream role now, but also to be interviewing you here today with Shawn. I think you're obviously such an incredible example of the Trainual core values in action, locking in the coveted Woolly of the Year award. And I think folks here really look to you as one of the gold standards for how we model our core values and interact with each other day in and day out. So as sort of the gatekeeper for protecting that culture and in ensuring folks who come in are not only the right fit in their skills, but also in their experience and the way they're a cultural fit, talk to us a little bit about your framework for finding those people who are the top performers or maybe the unicorns in their industries or in their expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for the kind words. And yeah, no pressure, right? If being a gatekeeper is such an amazing culture, I don't know how I got so lucky, but it's definitely not easy. I would say values-based hiring all day, every day. I like to move away from culture fit for a few reasons, right? I think when you look at culture, you can look at similarities really easily and create that like me bias. And the more you look at that, it tells you how somebody might quote unquote fit in, but it doesn't tell you how they're going to do the job. It doesn't tell you what they're going to bring to the table. And I think when you look at the diverse backgrounds that people bring to a company, that's the secret sauce of being successful and moving the organization forward. You can't do that if you're hiring people just like you. So for us, moving away from that, I'm really looking at values fit, right? So values, on the other hand, are action-based traits of how your company operates, right? So the more that you can pepper in those throughout your hiring process and make sure every value is evaluated somewhere in there, it will better determine how that person will be able to do the job, but do so in accordance to your values.
So we agree, I guess, that, company values are an important fit and culture is an important thing to look at, but it can be really hard to assess when it comes to just the uniqueness of humans. I mean, Shawn and I talk about this all the time and in process. How do you recommend companies structure their hiring process to truly evaluate whether a candidate embodies those core values? And what are some of your favorite techniques or questions that you ask during the interview process to maybe give folks who are listening today some insight into how they can level up their hiring process?
Yeah, really great question. So we do competency-based hiring as well. So every role has competencies that people are held to and values, right? So we pepper those in throughout the process. So make sure your interviewers know how values show up in your working day-to-day, right? And make sure that each core value is evaluated somewhere in the process. So at Trainual, for instance, carry the groceries is one of our values. So we're not asking candidates, tell me about a time that you helped somebody. That's a little too leading, right? So instead, it's saying, tell me about your projects and using behavioral questions, understanding the work they've done, and then knowing your values, you'll be able to see how that ability to be helpful and go above and beyond in your role really shines. And then I think where you place the values can make sense as well. So for us, carry the groceries makes a lot of sense being evaluated in the team interview because we're already asking questions about collaboration, right? Where something like make ideas happen goes really well in the project phase because candidates are already taking an idea and showing how they would execute that. So we'll make sure that they're in the appropriate place if that makes sense. So a few of my favorite questions, what core values guide your working style? Or for a leader, what core values guide your leadership style? What does the ideal working environment look like for you? And you would be shocked how many people say, I want something that's slow and methodical and I have all of the answers and, all of the things. And it's like, well, startups are a little bit different, right? That might not always be like that here. Reference checks are also incredible. What a tool, right? Because the reference check, they don't know the ins and outs of your company. So for us, tell me more about the culture that they were working at, how they navigated through that. What culture or environment traits would hinder this person from being successful? And those will give you a lot of insight. So
you mentioned the project phase, and it's actually something that I didn't get to experience during my interview process just because my hiring process was a little bit different. I like to say that the customer advisory board was kind of my first project during the hiring process, but I guess it was technically after I was hired. So I'm sure folks listening would love to hear how we handle project-based hiring as part of our evaluation and what that whole model looks like.
Yeah, great question. So it's really shifting away from talking the talk and showing how they'll walk it, right? Because I think it's so easy in hiring to have your answers or, be able to talk about your skills, but it's a different thing to be able to put that into action. So I understand, especially for small businesses, it's not always easy to have this robust project built and a whole panel to evaluate. So I understand that this can look different in every company. At Trainual, it's very role dependent. So sometimes it's giving them a problem, perhaps something we've solved, right? We're not trying to use candidates for free work. That's definitely something to steer away from. But it's saying, hey, here's a business challenge we've had. Talk through some ideas, right? So it could be something like that. Sometimes it could be portfolio reviews. So if you're a small business and you're super scrappy and strapped with resources for hiring, have no fear. Have them bring something to the table that they've already done and talk through it with the team, right? So that can act as a project because they're having to show something live. So it really does depend. Engineering roles, we do a technical evaluation, and that is a take-home, so they can code on their own, which is mimicking what they would be doing in the role. And then they would do a peer review and talk through it with some fellow engineers. And the great thing about this is for us as a hiring panel, it not only lets their skill set shine as a candidate, but it also gives them the taste of the role, right? I think hiring is just as much them interviewing us as it is us interviewing them. And I really want candidates to understand, ooh, that project was so challenging and I had a blast doing that. Perfect. That tells me a lot that you're probably going to like this job.
I love that. I also didn't get to do that part. I kind of would have enjoyed that actually quite a bit, What's a time frame that makes sense, because and maybe it's situational depending on the job you're hiring for, but what's a good time frame to be shooting for, a good expectation? What makes sense to ask someone to spend time that they're not getting paid for to do this kind of a project? What are your thoughts on that?
A couple things. I'll actually start from the process overall. I think that's probably a good thing to plug in, and then we'll talk about the project. So process-wise, if it's too short, candidates aren't getting a feel for, ooh, did I meet all of the people? Do I really have a representation? So your process should be long enough that everyone feels like they know what they're getting into, and short enough that candidates don't have interview fatigue, right? So when it comes to projects, the fatigue part is important. I will say, in Trainual, we're very lucky to be able to do this, but there are a lot of projects we actually do pay for. So these are sometimes just a gift card. It doesn't have to be, paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars. This could be a $50 gift card. But reason for that, again, we don't want free work, right? That's not the goal of these projects. They shouldn't be working on something that you're actually going to use. There are some roles, like a graphic design, where what they do in their project could have a similarity of something that we do. So that's where we'll pay to make sure it's almost like a contractor where they're doing what we ask. I think time-wise, I like the 2-hour mark. I understand that people have so many things going on outside of their job search, outside of their jobs. A lot of people are still working while they're interviewing. People have so many commitments. So I really want to be mindful on time. I think a 2 to 3 hour prep time is really acceptable. We have one that's a 6-hour commitment. And again, that one is a paid project, and we give a longer amount of time for them to complete it. So it really depends, Shawn, but I would say having something that candidates can take 2 hours to prep for is plenty. And then perhaps an hour live session or something like that where they're sitting and presenting to the team.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate the clarity on that one too. I think, again, I'm going to come back to just how cool I think of this is as an idea, because, on paper, we could look amazing, on an application or a cover letter or whatever that might be. And we always put our best foot forward in an interview process. But when we're able to actually show the things that we're able to do, there's a lot more of ourselves that comes out in that, right? The dedication we put into doing that project, the skills that we actually really, truly have as we're putting that thing together. So I appreciate that kind of a process involved in the hiring situation. So
yeah, we actually have a project for every role now too at Trainual. So I know Shawn was pre-Trainual, and Mallory we had already worked with and seen in some capacity. But for me, it was actually an executive search interview. So our VP of people for my project had somebody in her network, and I had to interview them. So we did a Zoom recording. I had to build out all the questions, the follow-up, things like that. I had so much fun. I loved it. I love interviewing people. That's what I do, right? So it was not only just a blast for me, but a really good way to see how I come up with questions and the things I ask and my professionalism and all of those things.
Fantastic. Hey, we got a question from Laura in the chat here, and it's very much in line with what we're talking about right now. How do you feel about person versus virtual interviews? And if you have an in-person component, what does that actually look like?
Yeah. So for years, I was actually recruiting remotely before COVID. So it's easy to hide behind Zoom. And Zoom is easy because you can have your questions, you can take notes very easily. You can have a lot of tools and resources up. So there's benefits of both, right? And in person, you have a little bit less of that. You have to let people know, hey, I'm going to be taking some notes. You might not have your scorecards. You might not have all of the things. And you also have to be a lot more engaged, right? Because you can't be hiding behind a computer. Because for me, when I'm taking notes and looking at a camera, they're simultaneous, right? Where in person, it's a little bit different. So for us at Trainual, we've actually started peppering in-person interviews for certain roles that we know are going to be based here. What I would recommend first and foremost, I purposely said for roles that are based here, what we don't want to do is have an inconsistent hiring process, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. So if it's a role that's perhaps, either remote or in person, and we're okay with either, and we have a candidate pool that are a mix of both, in person will be a different experience for candidates. And we don't want to give any bias or anything like that where, okay, this person we interviewed in person and then we had lunch and they got to meet everybody and then we walked in and got ice cream. I mean, that's going to be very different, and you're going to get a very different personal lens from that person. And you spent significantly more time with that person than you did on the folks that interviewed remotely. So I would say keep it consistent if possible, but we've done it for team interviews. That's a really good way. And I think it's okay if your team is comfortable with notes or even having their laptops. That's okay. Letting the candidate know, hey, I'm going to be taking some notes. I have them on my laptop, but we'll make sure to keep this really conversational. Totally fine. So just make sure your team is prepped for success. And then it's something that sometimes presenting, especially if you're going to have notes, sometimes that's easier in person. And then think about the remote experience as well. If you do have somebody presenting remote and your whole team is in office, can they hear you? Can they see what you're doing? Is the audio okay? Things like that really matter. And something that small can really trip a candidate up. Right? If people can't hear them and they have to repeat themselves constantly, it's not a great experience either. So just make sure that if you're choosing the remote or in person, that you're setting everybody up for ease and success.
I'm over here giggling a little bit because I'm not really sure how Marlowe and Shawn self-identify, but if I had to label them, I would say they're more extroverted. They're our extroverted people. And I'm more of a self-identified introvert. And so when they're talking about the interview process and they're oh, it's so you can show that you can, walk the talk. And I'm no, it's so that I can show you that I can do things that I can't talk about because I'm nervous.
I love that.
So I think it also gives people a chance, if they're not great interviewers, I guess the flip side of being a great interviewer and then not being able to perform the job well, there's another side to that. Maybe some people just get really choked up in interviews or they're not extroverted. And then you have them do a project and you're whoa, this person is worlds different than how I interviewed them. And I think that would probably be more the case for me.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of having people on your team that are different. You can't have only people who are extrovert or only this. And look at the role too. It's different if you're perhaps, if you're hiring a recruiter and they don't love Q&A in the interview. It's part of the job. Right. But at the same time, you're so right, Mallory. There are so many skills that people can bring, and how people interview in Q&A does not necessarily tell you their communication ability, right? People can be incredible communicators. I have the memory of a goldfish. So behavioral interviews are actually really hard for me as they're on the candidate side. So I think making sure that your process has project component, Q&A, something more casual, something more written. There's a lot of ways to evaluate skill sets. And if you can have a mix of that, it lets you take the full view of the candidate in play versus only dialing in on how they did with Q&A or how they did presenting to a group. Not everybody loves presenting in front of a group. And when you're interviewing as a candidate, you're going to be nervous. So of course that candidate's nervous. That doesn't mean that they're not going to do well in the role.
Yeah, I've got to call that out as such an important concept here, because you're right. People come to us from all different backgrounds, from all different levels of skill, different levels of comfort in different scenarios. So having a hiring process that provides different ways to interact gets you a holistic view of the person and what they're able to provide to you, right? And what you're able to provide to them if you are a good fit together.
Yeah.
So I love that you call that out so specifically, those different points that let you see who that person really is and what they're bringing in.
Yeah. And root for the candidate. I think sometimes we actually get this feedback all the time. Wow, I just felt so at ease. Your team made me feel so comfortable. And there are so many interview panelists that are, interrogation, and it's trying to trip candidates up. I heard something yesterday, tell me about this answer. And if they give an answer, then don't hire them. And it's why would we do that to them? That's not setting them up for success. And that's a good representation of how you operate in your company. If you're trying to trip people up and you're trying to be the person that holds the answers, then that says a lot about how you operate, right? So at Trainual, we want to give people an equal opportunity to let their skills shine in different ways. And hurrah, right? Root for them, care about their experience, and treat them like humans.
And not to take us too far off track, but it just made me think of something too. If your interview process sucks and I feel like you're interrogating me, I feel like you're trying to trip me up, and I am a top performer and I am being interviewed by other companies, I'm you're going to move to the bottom of my list if I'm even going to consider you at all. So if you are looking for top performers, remember that they are doing an assessment of you as well. So if your interview process sucks, you're not going to land people that are great, hires, because they'll go elsewhere.
Yeah. Your interview process should match the type of company you're trying to be, right? And I say trying to be because I know that, especially as a small business or where you're scaling, you're maybe not where you want to be yet. But, if you're a stuffy, boring gatekeeping company, like that'll probably reflect in your interview process. And if you're a warm culture that truly cares about people and experience, that should show too. And it should show from the minute somebody reads a job description to the first interview, the second interview, the offer, how helpful you are in the offer process. Those things really matter to candidates. So thank you for that, Mallory. I agree.
Yeah, of course. So in talking with you, there's obviously so many things to assess. There's so much emphasis on checking all of the boxes, skills, experience, cultural fit. But sometimes we find that those quote unquote perfect candidates aren't quite an ideal fit after all. So from your perspective, and I'm sure this is somewhat rare, what are some potential blind spots that companies or interviewers may have that leads to, I'll just say it bluntly, a bad hire?
Yeah. So a couple things, I think, before I frame up the blind spots. First and foremost, you cannot make the perfect hire 100% of the time. Or maybe your hiring process is great. It is the perfect hire and something happens and it doesn't work out. It doesn't necessarily mean it's your process. In recruiting, people are your product. We're not mass producing sneakers here, right? This isn't a manufacturing thing that we can get right every single time and get consistently. People have a lot of unique situations. It could be financial, family, health, mental health, competing offers. There are so many factors and the list just continues to go on, right? So for me, there's so many factors out of your control. The process and having a consistent process is the only thing you can control. So do that, right? Be aware of what you can control. When it comes to blind spots, look at where you deviate, right? Bias is a huge thing. Maybe, somebody on your team recommended them, we, play golf together. And it's like, oh, cool. They don't have to do a project. Like they vouch for them. It's like, are we vouching for their golf skills or are we vouching for how they're able to do the job, right? So did we skip any parts of the process? Did we not scope the role properly? This is a huge one. Setting people up for success is so important. And as a small business, I understand people wear a million hats. You're not always able to evaluate every skill that this person may be doing. But if you don't know what you're looking for and you're not evaluating the skills that they're going to need to be successful right away, they're doomed from the start, right? And that's not fair to the candidate. And I think another big blind spot is the working style of the company. Let's be real. So there are values alignments, there's skill sets, but then there's environment, and we want to set people up for success, and we really need to hire for that. So a good example of that, Trainual, we are fast, like high speed and high expectations. So, we're lacing up our running shoes, we're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we expect excellence. That's not the right environment for everybody, and that's okay. And if you want something that's more methodical, you have all of your answers, the job is the same every day, that's okay. Go find that in another company, but it might not be here. So I think it's really important to set the expectations of the good, the bad, the challenges, all of the things this person may be getting into, because the right person will raise their hand, right?
So I want to go back to something you said. You said it's not always your process. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. How do you know when to stop and say, hey, I think this process is broken and I need to make some improvements to make sure that this type of hiring situation doesn't happen again? How do you know when it is your process versus like just a fluke?
Great question. So a couple things, try not to change your process all the time. You're never going to have consistent data points. Really look at what didn't work first. So before you go to your hiring process, take a look at the hire and say, okay, they were really missing this. So maybe it's just adding that into your existing process. Or maybe it is like you skipped a step. Okay, we didn't do a project, we were rushed. Okay, so we need to go back to the original process. Or perhaps it's something with values fit. And it's, okay, did we look at that? What kind of questions were we asking? Maybe it's just changing a few questions. Perhaps it's pulling from companies that do or do not operate that way. So there are things that you might actually have to change that might not be your full process. And if you have to change it, just change it. That's okay. Do what you need to do. But look at the data points that you're getting as to why you think you need to change it first, and then connect those dots versus just looking at the process itself.
I love that. Always come back to facts.
So let me flip that one on its head a little bit. Every hire is going to be different, right? And so you can look back and say, all right, this didn't go so well, let's change this. But, that might have been a situational thing with that one hire, right? Yeah. So how do you ensure that you don't over improve, if that's even a possibility, right?
Yeah.
Or you are too focused on changing the things too rapidly, right, when it might have just been a situational thing.
I think acknowledge that it's probably a situational thing. I think it could perhaps be different if you have something like a hiring cohort and you're hiring 8 salespeople and 3 of them are struggling with this thing. Okay, we could probably go back and say this is in the hiring process. But, if you have an offer rejected or you have these things, again, these are human beings that have a lot of situations. So know that it's likely that there was something situational with that person. Do what you can, evaluate what you can, get the data points. If you need to make changes, take accountability and move on. Honestly, move on. If people are your product, you cannot lose sleep if somebody doesn't work out, because we also have to care about them and their career. And I think being a people first company, not only is having people that love working at your company, that's amazing, but people who say, hey, I'm going to bow out. This isn't the right role for me. Or people who take an opportunity that's life-changing for their career, life-changing for their family. At the end of the day, that's best for them. And it's never going to work out if you're somebody's stuck on your team, or they're staying for the wrong reasons, or you're trying to retain them and over-retain them and it's not a fit. So sometimes there are things like that. You just have to understand that it has to be about best for both parties.
So how do you probably do this on a regular basis. Like you kind of look back, identify, what your own improvements are. What are some of those that you've done in the past? I'm curious, and kind of go back to the past here with us, Marlo, a little bit. And, what are some adjustments that you've made as a result of experiences you've had in your work here and in other places as well?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we do hiring retros often. Sometimes the rinse and repeat roles that we've hired a lot, we don't have to do that as much. I'm in motion with the hiring manager. We have a good thing going, so we don't have to do that as much. But what we'll do is, after a search, sit down with the hiring panel, sit down with the hiring manager, especially when they're onboarding, say, hey, how are they ramping? What would you change about the hiring process? Have that authentic conversation. Be open to feedback. It's okay if people have feedback that something wasn't working. So for a good example of this, our engineers came to me and said, hey, the debriefs are not working for us because we know that you love the candidate and we don't know how the other person on the debrief feels and we don't want to step on each other's toes. And we find ourselves changing the perspective based on other people's feedback. So, hey, let's take away the debrief. Put in your notes in our scorecard. And if we need to debrief because, maybe people were all over the place or but if they're a heck yes or they're a heck no and it's consistent, do we need to debrief? So it was really easy to just take that feedback. Don't take it to heart. It's not personal, and make changes as you need to, right? So I think hiring retros are a really good thing to do, and really work with the hiring manager. How was this for you? What parts did you love? Which parts of the process felt redundant, right? And I think just asking the right questions and being really open to changing what you need to.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Well, I want to switch just the gears just a little bit here and kind of focusing on, we're talking to a lot of our customers here, a lot of people here that are on the call right now that are from small businesses. And we are super lucky to have a Marlowe with us, and on a regular basis as a full-time person who does this, or a recruiter and hire. So, but not everyone is at that place, right? Some of our companies, some of our clients are working very lean. They don't have a dedicated recruiting person. So considering that type of situation, right? What are some of your go-to strategies for finding and attracting quality candidates, people who can really do the work when you're working on such with limited efforts, right?
Absolutely. So a couple of things I might just spitball and go down a list. It depends on your industry, first and foremost, and what you're hiring for, right? So if you are looking for, general labor roles, are they on LinkedIn? Oh, well, we've only ever posted on LinkedIn. Okay, but that's probably not your place, right? Maybe Indeed is a better resource for you. Referrals. You have great people working for you. Use their network. Who do they recommend? Who do they know? Where did they find the job? Where did their friend find the job, right? Really ask around. Okay, it seems like people are on this job board. Great. Post away, right? Get visibility. Don't be afraid to do blogs, to put things on your LinkedIn or your company page, anything that would make people see and have visibility into your company. Reach out to people. Don't be afraid. LinkedIn is obviously, I use LinkedIn primarily because that's the type of roles we hire for are by and large on LinkedIn. So this could look different in different places, but reach out to people. Have your hiring manager or whoever's doing the hiring say, send a connection request. Hey, love your background. We're hiring for an interesting role. I would love for you to check it out. Let's chat, right? Something casual, something that's inviting. And then whatever you're sending them, make sure it makes sense with your brand. If, like we said earlier, if you are not a stuffy, boring company, why do we have a stuffy, boring job description? Make sure it's got your personality. It lists your values. It talks about the things that you value as a company, where you're going, the exciting things that people love about working there. If you can have that personality and the things that make the right person raise their hand, that's key. Because if they don't see that on the job description, they're looking at a million other job descriptions. Why are they going to choose yours?
Okay, can you talk through, we did this several years ago. We adjusted the way our job descriptions were posted and kind of morphed it to more of, again, our culture, our brand, who we are as an organization, that fast-paced but fun, conversational. I'd love to hear the process behind that a little bit and why we write our job descriptions the way we do.
Absolutely. So how many people have been in a small business where you wear hats and they change and evolve? All of us. That is the name of the game, right? So if your job description is just bullet points of something that you expect them to do in their first 2 months, and it's just a list of job duties, you're really missing out on evaluating a lot of the things that evolve. So instead, your job description should be a living, breathing document of something that is showing candidates what the success outcomes for the role are. Not just the job duties, right? And we have those too. We have, what you'll be expected to do. Obviously, candidates want to know that. What success are we looking for you to drive? What does success in this role look like? So for our job descriptions at Trainual, they have a lot of personality. I make sure to do that. I make sure to throw in a few jokes, throw in a few pieces of banter so people understand, oh, okay, cool. That's the kind of company I'm signing up for. But make sure that the job description says expectations, what tools they'll be using, anything to help the candidate really get a picture of what they're going to be doing will set you up for success. And if it's something that doesn't represent the changing of your company, talk about that. Hey, the role is ever changing. Here is, instead of some of the job duties you're going to be doing, here are some things that we really are going to be looking for and ways that we pivot and the way we handle change management. Talk about it.
All of that. Yeah, these are such good nuggets. I'm going to pop this into just to everyone out there. You got questions for Marlowe, pop those into the chat for us because she is open ears and ready to share. So Laura just said, is there a difference between a job posting and a job description?
Yes. So a job posting is likely going to be tied to the thing you're posting on, but it's going to encompass your job description. Does that make sense? So you have a job description of the things they'll be doing, more about the role, more about the company, the success outcomes, all of those things are your job description. And then you're putting those in job postings, which is where you're collecting applicants. And again, they need to be representative of your company. So for us at Trainual, we have an incredible careers page if you haven't checked it out, but it talks about our values. It talks about the company, some of the things that people need to know, how we think about remote work, how we think about compensation. Those are all in the job description, which again, go in the job posting so that people really have a full picture of the company and what it's like to work here.
I wonder if Laura's asking the question a little bit more specifically in terms of you can have a really lengthy job description that's like very detailed. Would you add all of those details to the job posting, or is it more of like a pared down version of the full job description? Are they a mirror for one another?
Great question. I think by and large, less is more. People are not going to read something that's so many pages. So for us, we have our careers page is where we have all of the in-depth, what it's like to work here, things like that. And then the job description is, we call it a TLDR, so a little paragraph about the role, what they'll be doing, success outcomes, anything else they need to know about the team, compensation, things like that. So they do need to mirror each other in a sense, but I think just think about your audience, right? What kind of jobs are you posting for? If it's an executive role, I likely need to talk about where the company is going, what we're doing, what we want this person to be handling, right? There might be more meat in the job description versus something that's, maybe general labor or something roofing, something that's more transactional. Tell me what I'm doing. Tell me what you expect. Sign me up.
Awesome. Jane said she was about to ask the same thing, so I'm glad you covered that.
Yeah.
I want to jump back a couple steps now. We talked about, again, posting a job here. We talked a little bit about the hiring process to this point. I want to talk about screening. I think screening is one of these things that is a great thing to do, and it doesn't get done very well very often. It's screening your candidates in because you want to spend your time as efficiently as possible. So in that screening process, what are some of the questions that you're asking? What are you getting right down to find out in that initial, whether it's probably like a phone screening or other type of initial interview? What does that look like for you? What are some of the questions you like to ask?
Great question. So first and foremost, before I go into some questions I ask, think about the flow of the interview. Be open-ended. Don't give people the answer to the question, right? So actually, a tip for me, I highly recommend talk about the company and the job at the end. So if you tell people what you're looking for, what they'll be doing at the beginning, they're likely going to mirror their answer to what you're looking for, right? So instead, I'd say something like, I would love to start with a quick high-level overview of your background. We'll dive into some questions about the role, and then we'll obviously save some time to talk more about the Trainual and the position, right? So I do that at the end so that people get to give a really authentic look into what they're looking for and what they do. So from there, some of my questions, obviously I tailor a lot of them to the role. So things like quota attainment, or on the engineering side, talking about tech stack and some of the projects they worked on. So I'm also obviously responsible for making sure they align to the job. But some high level questions, describe your working environment in your current role. Really easy, but are they in something that is super corporate or something very scrappy, right? Those will show in their answers there. what are a few things you're really incredible at that'll help you hit the ground running in this role? What does the ideal role look like for you? And this is helpful too. Sometimes people will come to a Trainual interview and they'll say, I really want to be an enterprise. Yeah, okay. Maybe not the right role for you. Or they'll say, 5 or 6 things that I know they're not going to love this because that's not our environment here. And that's a good opportunity for me to say, hey, I really care about your career. I care about what you're looking for and I care about your next step. This is not that. Here's why, right? And I think it's actually okay to talk people out of things for a minute and really give them the authentic good, the bad, the ugly, because the right person will say, oh, that's a challenge I'm up for solving. And the wrong people might say, you know what, you're right. That's probably not the right fit for me.
Yeah, I love that level of honesty right up there. And I love the way you did that. Let's be honest and have a conversation why this may or may not. And the fact you just said it's okay to talk someone out of the job if it's not the right fit for them and for us. So I think that's really an honest thing. It puts forth a really great view for that potential hire of, hey, this is, in any case, this is the right organization or it is an awesome organization altogether. So
you only sell on the bright, shiny object. Then as soon as something goes wrong in the role, they feel blindsided. I didn't know that this was how we operate, or I didn't know this was going to happen. And it's okay to say, hey, love that. Glad these things align. Here are some challenges that we're trying to solve as a company. How do go through them? How does that sound to you? How do those align to some of the challenges you've solved? And again, the right person's like, oh, I'm not afraid of that. I got that. Okay, cool. Great. Let's continue this, right?
But Laura's asking
question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. She's asking how you feel about assessments and profiling tools as part of your hiring process.
Okay. I'll take a deep breath. So I don't think that they should be part of the process personally. And everyone has a different recruiting opinion here. We actually use the Kolbe assessment. We use it in hiring, or we use it post-hire. So we use that for the onboarding experience. And for us, Kolbe tells a lot about working styles and how communication and how to best, tackle different projects as a team. That's amazing. What I don't want to do though in the hiring process, and I have used them before, so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I really want to stick away from like me bias, right? So what is that assessment showing? And is it really showing their ability to do the job? And there are some, especially in executive search where sometimes, a CFO profile or a COO needs to balance out your CEO. I understand those things, but for me, I look at those assessments and I see all the time, it's like, okay, cool, I'm the same way. Or, they're going to be different than me. And is that a bad thing? And also as a candidate, how many people have taken those assessments and been like, oh my gosh, I was so confused, or I was so nervous, or I didn't know if I answered that correctly. We have that almost every time we give the Kolbe to a new hire. People are like, I'm not sure if I did a good job. And good for you. There's no good or bad job to do. But imagine being a candidate and the pressure of you wanting this job is on this assessment that you're taking and you don't even know what the right answers are, or you don't know what they're evaluating or how they're using that to be evaluated. And I think it could be a little bit tricky. So I personally would recommend them post-hire. Once you've already offered the job, then you can use them as a tool of, okay, cool, they're going to be working with this group of people, and these are the types of projects they work on. They might need this style of communication. So definitely as a tool, and even in the hiring process, if you want to use it as a tool, great. Just don't use it as your decision maker.
Yeah, and I think it also puts this pressure the same way an interview does of trying to select the right answers or say the things that they think you want them to. And so it's not really a good assessment of who they are at all. And so waiting to have those assessments after some of that pressure is gone gives you a real look at their personality and how they collaborate, which to your point of caring about them as people really helps to set them up for success versus going on this arbitrary thing that doesn't mirror their style at all.
Yeah. And so some of those assessments, Kolbe in particular, I really like the Kolbe assessment, by the way. Like I said, we use it for onboarding and it's a really helpful tool. But sometimes answers can change if people are what's called in transition. So let's say you're going through a big life change, you're moving, you're starting a new job, all of these things are happening that can impact your answers. So again, a lot of candidates are going through a change. So is that the time? Or, somebody like me, I'm the worst with assessments. I'm like, oh, but I can see it's I'm strongly disagree or strongly agree. It really depends on the situation. And nobody's giving me the time to ask about the situation. So I don't want to not get the job because I wasn't sure how to answer that question, right? So, and it comes back to what Mallory was saying earlier, if maybe some people are incredible at projects and not great test takers. Not everyone is a great test taker. And again, use it as a tool. Don't make a hiring decision based on somebody's ability to test take.
So true. All right, so I want to pivot. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to dive into it a little more deeply. So talented people have options. That's just the cold, hard truth, especially in this market. And this episode is structured around hiring the best top performers, obviously. How can smaller, more budget constrained companies realistically compete against larger, as you called them, enterprise companies for these top candidates? And what are your suggestions there? I know I have an answer for how you landed me.
I love that. Okay. Yeah, no, I want to hear about that. So authenticity is free. It doesn't cost you any money to be yourself and to show the type of company that people are signing up for. Like I said at the beginning, it should mirror the type of company that you want to be. So like Mallory said earlier, I might not remember every detail of the interview process. I will remember how they made me feel. And big companies, oftentimes, they're not able to give that same level of feeling and attention to each candidate because it's just a different volume, right? So I've seen people throughout my career, but especially at Trainual, take pay cuts, or I've got an offer from Google and I've got an offer from Trainual. Which is going to give me more autonomy? Which am I going to be safer to bring ideas to the table? Which is going to be a more collaborative team, or that I'll have access to ask the CEO questions? Those things really matter. So I think look at your talent pool and say, what is important to people and what can we offer here? And you know what? It is not always compensation. Actually, very, very rarely do people come to me and say, the only thing I care about in the job is money, right? I think people say, hey, that's important and you need to make X amount. And of course, that's really, really important. But people are looking at, what type of place is this? Am I going to have to say no to all my family gatherings because I have to be working every weekend? Those things matter and people care, right? So same with, defining culture with your ping pong tables. And, years ago, especially when startups came up, it was, we have beer on tap. We have a laundry service. I don't care if you have beer on tap or you have a laundry service if I don't feel trusted in my job. So there are things that are more important than the bright, shiny object. So really get clear on what you can offer. Get clear on what people love about working for your company. Have your employees ask, hey, go review us on Glassdoor. Go leave us a rating. Like, start to build that up so people can really understand, wow, you know what? This might not be Google, but you're an incredible place to work. I'm going to have a lot of ability to make an impact here. And people really care about those things. So just make sure you're positioning the things that you shine with.
Absolutely. I say this all the time because I post a lot on LinkedIn about high performance. It's like one of the things that I talk about a lot. And in all of the people that I've communicated with and like the books that I've read about high performers, it's like, I would say like a fundamental like understanding that high performers are not driven by title or salary. They are driven by making an impact. They're driven by being part of something that's important and understanding that the work that they're doing has bigger meaning and purpose. Those are the things that drive high performers. And so in our interview, it was like, no red tape, make ideas happen. And we're talking about, projects, and we have the $500 for an experience. And I think if you told me it was $50 or $500 or $5,000, it probably wouldn't make much of a difference because all I'm hearing is you care that I have a life also outside of work and I'm kicking ass while I'm at work. And so those are the types of things that really stood out to me. And it wouldn't matter what company came in and said, hey, I'll offer you X amount of dollars. Like, it wouldn't be worth the experience. We only have one life. And so I want to experience my job in a way that feels fulfilling. And I feel like it's important. And I love the people that I work with, and no amount of money is going to, could put a price on that. And so obviously I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. And imagine somebody, especially, the two people I'm talking to, right? Between Mallory and Shawn, the sky's the limit. Imagine being just a number and the things you do hardly make a dent and nobody really recognizes it. Tell me again that you'd rather take a Google offer or something like that where you just can't say the same thing, right? So yeah, I'm so glad you're here. And those things really matter. And the experience fund for me too, same. I don't care what the dollar amount was. The fact that I'm celebrated to go try a new thing is amazing. And I'm really big on travel and just experiencing different things. And I felt so supported here. I have never had to say no to a family function, ever. I've never had to say no to a yoga class. We have they're called decision principles here. So aside from our values, if I have to make a quick decision, what can I do if nobody else is in the room? And one of them is never skip yoga. It doesn't mean you need to like yoga. I hope you do, but doesn't. But it's really saying, hey, say yes to the things that are important to you, because the more you say no to those, the more they're going to impact you at work, right? So do well at work, do well outside of work, and the two of them should be a beautiful blend of things you're passionate and care about versus this job that sucks my soul and I have to go home. And then it affects your family. There's a whole trickle effect that goes there, right? So for small businesses looking to compete with those offers, and again, you might not always compete with everyone. That person got offered 200 grand more. Like, I don't know. They need to do what's best for their families. But I think by and large, top performers are going to choose the things that allow them to drive the greatest impact.
Yeah,
I love that.
I so love that. You said something a few moments ago. You said authenticity is free. And what an important factor that is as you're interviewing and sharing the authentic nature of what the business is. Jane a few minutes ago asked, we're in transportation, so there's lots of track and trace and driver management and customer soothing when things go wrong. It's fast-paced and high pressure, and I try to be as transparent as possible, but the proof is in the pudding. And I would say, and Jane and Marlowe, you probably agree with me on this one, if you are being authentic and being clear about what the expectations are and what the pace is, then that's what you should be doing, right? And you're going to find the top performers who are going to thrive in that type of scenario. And if you are that authentic about it, because some people really do. Like, my wife loves, give me a problem and I will solve it. It's like, I don't care how high pressure it is, let's just do it. And it's amazing. And so that authenticity really helps in finding the right individual. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you imagine spending, 40 hours, whatever that is, not being able to be yourself? Right. And I remember early in my career, I was in such an identity crisis because people said, you care too much. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And especially in high school, you can't be a doctor. You care too much. And it's like, isn't that a superpower? Isn't something that's going to help me? And I think when you look at CX roles, that's a great example too, especially in the trucking, the empathy that's needed. It is hard. It's so hard. And the right people will say, hey, I so care about our customer base. I want to show up for that. And I want to solve that hard problem, and allowing them to do so and be themselves along the way. Nothing is more draining than feeling like you have to be somebody you're not, or feeling like you can't bring your full self to work. And I think so many of us have been in environments where we were put in this little box and that is the only thing. And, Trainual has definitely allowed me to bring my full self to work. I lead meditation. I get to be, nobody polices how I have to show up in an interview. I just get to be me. I get to care about the things I care about, which is this business and helping people be successful. And the dots connect once you have that recipe, right?
Okay, so let's talk about that right candidate, because the perfect candidate, right? And there's this temptation that we sometimes have of no, we're going to find the perfect one. And no, they're great, but they're not exactly perfect. So when do you know when to pull that trigger and go, okay, now this person is perfect enough?
How many people on here are hiring or in HR, and this is giving you anxiety? This question, this is my life, right? I think there will always, especially hiring managers, we want the perfect person, and I think it's important to look at red flags. It is also important to look at green flags. What is this candidate doing that is a yes for us, right? So they are skilled, especially if you're on the fence, you have a lot of options. If they're skill aligned, their values aligned, they align to your environment, they're giving you all of these green flags. Make the hire fast, hire effectively. And people say, oh, if I hire fast, I don't love that mentality, because I think for training and onboarding and helping them be successful, you hopefully shouldn't have to do that, right? But I really think it's looking at the full picture and remove your gut feelings. Be objective. You're not picking your wedding party. You're picking your hire. You're picking the person who's going to drive success in your company. That is not always going to be the person you want to be best friends with. And that's okay. They need to align to your values, right? They need to care about the same things that you care about. But it's okay if they're different than you. And I think sometimes we have to say, most importantly, nobody is perfect. Everybody deserves great training and onboarding. Everybody needs to adjust to the environment because your company is new for them. That is just the way of the world. Everybody has areas that they can learn and develop, right? So if you're looking for perfection, you'll either never make the hire or you'll be disappointed every time. So I think it's really important to not just take candidates out of it for a second and look at yourself and say, hey, what is important? What are need to haves? What are nice to haves? And what are things that might actually outweigh my need to haves? Wow, they don't have that, but oh my goodness, I didn't even think about how valuable this thing would be, right? So really being able to say, I know they're going to have to learn. I know we're going to have to train them. That is human. That's okay. Who's going to be successful here? And look at the green flags too.
I like that you said, never making the hire, but there's also not making the hire fast enough too, especially when we're talking about high performers.
Mm-hmm. Or losing great. Yeah. What if you have a high performer and they're at the offer stage and they're bouncing, they've got a lot of different companies or different offers on the table, and you're sitting there but are they, good example of this too, which I'm sure we can talk more about. backgrounds. But, we spun out an implementation team, right? Shout out, they're amazing. And our first implementation hire, you would think we'd be looking for somebody with a lot of implementation experience. Turns out we found somebody who is incredible, and she's got a lot of project management experience and a lot of small business consulting experience. I will choose those two things all day, every day, because her ability to step in, build process around implementation, deliver an incredible experience for customers is so much more important than, well, you haven't been software. You haven't done a software implementation. It's like, it's you haven't done the job, but you have so many amazing things that translate to the success of the role. So being able to look at those things and, and make the hire quickly, Mallory, is so important.
This might be the most important question that I ask you. And I know we've got 5 minutes here and we'll start wrapping up. But for me, this is the one that is like closest to my heart. And it's preparing leaders to be able to support top performers. I think people get, businesses, HR, hiring managers, leadership teams, they get in this mindset of like, we want this high performance team. We want to, change our hiring process to really target like top performers. And they go through all these things. And then they hire these people and they're out the door in under a year. And they can't figure out why they can't retain them. And it's really because they haven't established the environment, which we've talked a little bit about on this session, but they haven't established a mindset or a leadership structure that really supports a high performer. This is something I talk about probably most of all. Walk me through how you help to prepare leaders to take on the person that, you're proposing that they hire.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I am not the sole person proposing they make the hire, first of all, right? I think that you need to look at the bandwidth of what you can hire. I think if you have a leader who's new to leadership, they have so much on their plate, they have very limited bandwidth, and you're looking at hiring somebody brand new who's going to need a lot of coaching and development, is that setting that person up for success? And it breaks my heart when people, hire people and they expect them to just be perfect right away. And it's like, wow, well, they need this coach, and that's important. Onboarding is setting up for success. This is why I love this product so much. How you start the employee journey sets the stage, 100%, right? Obviously, we use Trainual for this. So for our onboarding process, it is giving them the content they need to be successful. And we do a 30, 60, 90 to make sure that they have the clear expectations of what they need to do to be successful here. We do a feedback training, company intros, stakeholder meetings. There's a lot that goes into making sure that hires are set up for success. And then communication is key from there. And I think for us, Mallory, to your point of the leadership side of it, is also setting expectations with your leaders. If you want to make this hire, here are the things that we'll expect from you. Here's the amount of time you're likely going to spend onboarding. Here's what you'll need to do to set that expectation. And we have them built 30, 60, 90s. We make sure that they have the right Trainual content. This stuff does not happen overnight, and it's hard to do, but it's important. And there are so many resources out there for leadership too. So it could be a class, it could be it could be a video on YouTube. If you're like, I don't know where to start, or my leader needs more coaching on this, make sure they have that, because at the end of the day, you just did all of that hiring and all of that onboarding for somebody who's not going to get what they need to be successful, and it's not going to work out, right? So being really crystal clear on the expectations of the candidate and the expectations of the leader.
I love it. It's a great way to wrap us up. Just want to share with everyone. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Marlowe, for being here.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Let's give it up for Marlowe in the chat there, right?
This was so much fun. And if anybody ever has any questions, I'm Marlowe at Trainual. I would love to hear from you. And hiring can sometimes be a team effort. And there are so many people in my network who have helped support me and try to figure some of these things out. So thank you both so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah, of course. And as always, we have several process templates to share, a couple of which are brand new. So this group will be the first to get them. We have a new hiring interview process and a recruiting process that have both been vetted by Marlowe. So super excited to share those, which we will share in the recap, as well as our coveted pre-hire checklist, our new hire checklist. We have almost 100 job descriptions available to get you started. We've got leadership templates and culture templates, which are things that we talked about this time around. So we will put all of those nuggets into our recap, and we can't wait to share with you guys. So thanks, as always, for being here.
I love it. Yeah, we're going to share that in the form of a subject. We'll get that out to you. I've got a quote just to end this off, just capstone off. And Marlo, I think you'll love this because you said almost these same words just a few minutes ago. Okay, here we go. Quote is, hire for attitude, train for skill. And I think of Marilena, you brought her up a few moments ago. That's exactly what that describes, right? That's what we're shooting for. So Thank you so much, Marlowe, for being our guest here today. And thank you everyone here for being with us, for being our Inside the Process crew. Join us next time. We'll send you some more information on the upcoming episodes of Inside the Process. It's getting exciting, everybody. We'll share some more details in the near future, but we're going to have some great fun here the rest of the year.